This is the Awful Announcing Podcast. Here's your host, Brandon Contes.
Alrighty, welcome to episode 72 of the Awful Announcing Podcast. I'm your host, Brandon Contes, and this week we are joined by former NFL Network host and current radio voice of the Cleveland Browns, Andrew Siciliano. Andrew, thanks so much for coming on the podcast this week following an emotional win for the Browns and an emotional call on the radio broadcast after Jim Donovan, the longtime radio voice of the Browns, passed away last week. What were the emotions like for you in the booth on Sunday?
Oh, wow, Brandon, good to see you. Thanks for having me on. How much time do you have? There is a lot to unpack there. And honestly, I think all of us are still kind of unpacking it. And everyone is still very much in mourning. You know, Jim wasn't just the voice of the Browns for 25 years. He was a fixture in this community for 40 years. He was the legendary WKYC, the Channel 3 anchor here, long before he ever moved into the booth when the Browns came back in '99. So when you describe somebody as a pillar of the community and not just a conduit for the football team, but someone that everyone who loves sports in this town kind of considers family, it's going to take a while. And that game Sunday, I think, was a start of the mourning and the healing, and it felt damn good for the city and the organization to get a win. But I think for Jim's family as well, for his wife Cheryl, for his daughter Megan, Kevin Stefanski, Andrew Berry brought them a game ball very shortly after that game ended. That one was for Jim in so many ways, and I think somebody said it might have been Nathan Zegura. Honestly, I can't remember. The last couple of days have been a fog, but it wasn't just for Jim. It was by Jim. Because, Brandon, there were so many things in that game that defy description. Kyle Hamilton dropping the pick on the play before the go-ahead touchdown by Cedric Tillman of the fourth quarter. Or Rashad Bateman losing the ball in the sun on that deep shot in the fourth quarter from Lamar. Even in the first quarter, or second quarter rather, Lamar had a deep shot to Zay Flowers where he just missed it by that much. Any of those things happen, one of those things happen, then they don't win. So as Nathan said, I don't know if you believe in divine intervention or not, but it felt like there was something else at play on Sunday.
Yeah, no, it was cool seeing Kevin Stefanski give Jim the game ball last season when he returned from leukemia treatment. It was cool seeing the Browns give the game ball to the Donovan family on Sunday. Just seeing the respect that the locker room, the team, the players clearly have for him. You mentioned Jim being a pillar in Cleveland. What did he mean to the Browns?
It's you can't really put it into words. He was the first voice anyone heard in '99 when they played the Hall of Fame game and came back right down the street at then what was Fawcett Stadium in Canton. And Kevin Johnson caught the touchdown from Tim Couch there to open up the scoring. And that was his voice you heard that day. To that night you mentioned when they beat the Jets on TNF the Thursday after Christmas last year to make the playoffs. There have been so many down. There's been a lot of losing. Let's not sugarcoat it. So there's been a lot of commiserating with Jim over the years, and he called it like he saw it with some gallows humor and some sarcasm, but with joy. It's really hard to replicate a smile on the radio, but you can hear people smile if you listen carefully on the radio when they really love what they do, and Jim had that. And I can tell you as a Browns fan living in LA, when they scored, touchdowns were blessings, wins, God forbid. And when those things happen, you had to hear Jim's voice to really connect with those moments to know that they were real. And I would leave the Red Zone studio on Sundays in Los Angeles and DirecTV, and I would listen to Sirius on the way home, or I would go watch Sunday Night Football and sit on my couch and pour a drink, and I would go through Twitter to try to find those calls, because that's what made those moments real. And so the Browns, and people forget, they haven't won a championship since '64, but they're an international brand. And I know that the younger generation doesn't remember that because the Super Bowl era, the NFL is 105 years old. It's not 59 years old. And the Browns have an international fan base. And Jim is the voice that connects that fan base. And his calls are their gospel. And so he meant so much to the fan base, but just to the people in the building. I mean, I'm not there every day. I'm new to this job, but it is warmed my heart to hear everyone tell their favorite Jim stories the last week. How he helped young people in the building, and how he was always picking the brains of older people in the building, older people, the coaches, whomever, to try to get the football knowledge. But what really has stood out to me is how many former players, Joe Thomas, Phil Dawson, or current players like Myles Garrett, have said that when he came into the locker room, um, that the players saw him maybe not necessarily as one of us, but that someone that they could confide in, someone that was never out to get them, was on their side, but not in a team whitewashing kind of way. Just was a real human. He had an ability to connect with people, and that goes to everyone in the building and everyone in town.
Was it well, look, there are only 32 of these jobs. They're not easy to get, and you should be proud that you have one. So I don't want this to sound like I'm throwing cold water on that, because I'm not.
Not at all.
But was it hard to replace Jim, considering the circumstances? Just knowing that he was only 68 years old and forced to step away for health reasons.
There are a lot of it's complicated. My emotions are complicated, and I don't know if that sounds right. I want to add context to that. It's heartbreaking. It is. I'd never wanted. You never want something under these circumstances, right? I mean, never. It like hurt my heart that this is how I got here. The opportunity to do this job is something that I kind of daydreamed of doing since I was 10 years old, right? I mean, I used to sit in the stands and listen to Jim's predecessor when I would come here in the 80s and 90s, visit my grandmother, and I would sit in the stands and listen to Neb Chandler call games at the old stadium. You don't want to get a job like this. When the phone rings, you like my first thing was, oh my God, Jim's retiring, and then you let it sink in, and it's like, yeah. I mean, I am happy to be here, and they're treating me amazingly well, and I can't be more grateful to the organization. I just wish it this is not why I was here.
Did you get to talk to Jim at all about the job?
We texted a lot in September, a few times in September, and last fall as well. I did 3 games last year. Jim had to take a sabbatical last season. Chris Rose, Paul Keels, Tom McCarthy was here last week for CBS. I got 3 games. We all kind of teamed up, and then Jim, thank God, came back for not only the Jets game, but Week 18 as well, and then the wild card game in Houston. So we communicated in September, he was always amazingly supportive, and could not have been kinder, and I could not be more appreciative of that.
I know you mentioned being a Browns fan growing up, but you're from Northern Virginia.
Yep.
You live in Los Angeles. How did you end up becoming a Browns fan? How did the Cleveland Browns end up becoming a dream job for you?
So my dad is from here. My dad's family is from here. Aunts, uncles, cousins, everybody on this side of the family. My grandmother. And my brother and I grew up in Northern Virginia, the DC burbs, because that's where my father settled after the military, after the Army, and he got back from Vietnam. And my dad swears that he always wanted us to root for the local teams, but he was a screaming Browns fan. And even though we live right down the street from Redskins Park, and a lot of their kids went to our schools, and they were winning Super Bowls, Joe Gibbs and Doug Williams and Jay Schrader and Mark Rippon, we just became Browns fans. And my aunt here in Northeast Ohio would send me the Plain Dealer every Monday morning and Browns News Illustrated and all these things. And my brother and I became diehard Browns fans and Tribe fans and everything Cleveland fans. My brother's been a Browns season ticket holder since '99 when they came back. He lives in Northern Virginia as well. He doesn't come to every game. His wife would leave him, but you get my point. He gives the other ones to cousins up here. And that just became my sports DNA. So it is in my blood, and that is who I am, and you cannot shake it.
What was it like for a family living in Northern Virginia when the Browns? You're not too far from Baltimore now. The Browns moved to Baltimore. Were you a fan of the Ravens? Was that sacrilegious?
Yeah, you don't do that. For a couple of years, my family was kind of lost in the football wilderness until the Browns came back in '99. I'm fairly certain that the only time anyone from my family has been in M&T Bank Stadium, which, by the way, is a great building, and they have a great organization, truly, uh, was when I did the Rams for 14 years in the preseason. When we played a preseason game there, and so my folks came up to say hi and then came to the game. You're a Browns fan and a Browns fan only. I had it lucky. I lucked out in that '96, the first year the Browns were gone. Um, I was a kid out of school, and I was working at the old CBS News O&O in Chicago, WMAQ radio, and I was covering the Bears. So instead of sitting at home crying in my beer that I didn't have a football team, I was at Soldier Field, covering a Dave Wannstedt coach team. There were a lot of Bears fans crying in their beer in '96. So I kind of had something to keep me busy until they came back, and I could still working with the Bears, but at that point, keep an eye on the scoreboard.
I'm curious what would have happened then if the move happened when you were 10 or 12 years younger. If you were 10 years old, like that's such a unique position to be in for a kid that is a fan of a team, and now you're having the team relocate closer to you. Like that doesn't really happen to many people.
I'm glad I didn't have to go through that, Brandon. I'll be honest. We probably would have taken our cue from our dad, who would spit fire against Art Modell. So we probably would have been lockstep in that regard. But I'm glad I didn't have to face that. Look, you have like, for example, fans in LA that had to go through that, right? So you had those teams pack up and move right around the same time to the Bay Area and to St. Louis, and you really had a lost generation in LA for football fans. And I think I probably would have done what a lot of kids did, and that is you maybe watch Sunday Ticket and you find another team, and fantasy football really wasn't a thing but you have in towns like that, you have kind of free agent kids who I think fantasy football has changed a lot, and Sunday Ticket and the ability to, let's say you have a favorite player, whomever your favorite player is, you could go on your phone and buy that jersey, and the jersey is going to show up on your front step the next day, right? It's a different world that this generation of fans grows up in.
Yeah. We'll talk about the current Browns a little bit. Were you what did you think of Jameis Winston last week, and what are the vibes now that the Browns are getting a chance to see what he can be as the starter?
It's what a difference a week makes, right? I mean, the NFL is an amazing Groundhog Day experience where Monday's the same, Tuesday's the same, Wednesday's the same, right? And it's the same cycle. You're on that bike every week, but it's a heck of a lot easier ride when you win. And I think the entire town obviously has a different attitude today. Still realistic. The record is what it is. It is 2-6. But there is a sense of hope that if Jameis can go out there and play as he did this past Sunday and continue to play that way moving forward, knowing that, Jameis might throw a pick or two, might have thrown a couple of picks last week if the Ravens had hands. I get it. Then you got a chance, and that's all anybody wants. You beat the Chargers. If you beat the Chargers, you get to 3 wins, you get a bye. next week, and you come back and you go to New Orleans. It's a winnable game. Again, you can't look that far ahead, but there is a sense of optimism here because the offense got back to what we've seen it do in the past: throw for 300 yards, stretch the field, everybody gets involved, put up points. I think that re-energized the defense. I think that certainly re-energized the fan base in the building, and that building felt like it did last year. I was here for 2 home games last year, one as a fan, that Jets game, and then one that I called, the Niners game, in which they beat them. It maybe didn't feel like the Niners game or the Jets game. Certainly that was a playoff clinching victory, but I'm not the only one to say it kind of felt like everyone got their swagger back, and not talking about the dog, may he rest in peace. And it felt good.
Did you think the Browns should have made the switch to Jameis sooner?
That's a tough one. Kevin Stefanski was asked that yesterday, and he said he doesn't want to look back. He wants to look forward. Look, you could play the coulda, woulda, shoulda. I'm a big fan of saying, both can be true. Right? You can look back and say, well, look, maybe if Jameis came off the bench in this game or that game, they could have won. Sure, you can say that. You can also say that when Deshaun Watson got hurt last year, when he went 14 of 14, week 11, in Baltimore in the second half, this is best performance as a Brown. He did so, by the way, with a high ankle sprain, and we find out later a broken bone to the back of his shoulder that made him that shut him down. They were 7-4. All right, they have seen him do that. You have to try to get back to that. You organizationally, like, you've seen it. You know that's your winning formula. You have to try to find a way to get that magic back. It didn't happen, and you hate that the switch happens because of an injury, and an injury like that. Not just a high ankle, hey, give the other guy a shot, you'll be back in a month. But an Achilles injury like that, where it's a year-long recovery, it's devastating for any athlete. You didn't want to see it like that. But like I said, both can be true. Might they want another game with Jameis or 2? Yeah. Do I get why they needed Deshaun out there? Absolutely. I mean, he's your guy, and you got to try to make it work.
So was it trending toward the direction of making that switch, or do you think they would have been reluctant to make a quarterback switch for performance reasons, and it was only going to come under the circumstances of an injury?
It's a great question. I don't know the answer. I'll tell you the truth from where I sit. I simply don't know that answer. I can tell you that, like, for example, the Raiders game. Let's go back to that one. That was probably his best performance of the year, other than Jacksonville, which is a victory. They had an 82-yard touchdown to Amari Cooper taken back on a suspect holding call. Ross Tucker said it on the CBS broadcast that day. Others have said it as well. Probably not a hold. If that happens, the record's different. We're probably not necessarily having this conversation. Does the Achilles injury still happen? Probably. Luck happen. I mean, it's bad luck. What was the other one? There's another one in that game. The ball off Amari Cooper's chest. He hits him 30 yards downfield between 3 defenders. Perfect ball. One of the better balls he threw all year. It goes for a pick. And then the Raiders scored 2 plays later. So there's a lot of what ifs. I don't know that Kevin Stefanski would have benched him, but it obviously it wasn't going well.
What did it sound like in the stadium when Watson got hurt? Did you notice the fans cheering right away? Was it loud?
I did. From where I was, I did. Yes, I heard some. I did not think it was that loud. There was a lot going on that day. So yes, it was there. There were noticeable boos, absolutely, when he came out of the tunnel, absolutely. And then Nick Chubb right behind him was exactly the opposite. And you could certainly see that difference. My brother, who was sitting in the stands, said that, yes, he did hear some cheers, whatever you want to call it, when he got hurt, and that he immediately felt uncomfortable. And then there were plenty of other people in his section that, I don't want to say shouted down, but let it be known that's not cool, and that it didn't last long. But yeah, it happened. Absolutely. it did happen, and it felt uncomfortable. What I thought was great, and don't take all this out of context here, like what truly was great was what we saw this past week when Jeremiah Owusu-Koramoah got hurt, when JOK went down. The fans immediately started chanting his name out of support. And the players, and I don't know if CBS caught this, the players had their hands up. Myles Garrett and Michael Hall, a whole bunch of players, Darius Smith, Juan Thornhill, saying, yes, we hear you. And yes, this is good, and encouraging that. And that really was a great moment. Yeah, you know, that's the one where you say, okay, this is cool.
But it wasn't when Watson got hurt. It wasn't like it was 70,000 fans in unison cheering the injury.
No. But look, there were those that did, and you can't whitewash that. It absolutely happened, and along those lines, like I also support players. Sorry, my light's moving here. Who support their teammates. Truly, like, you don't want to hear that. We all agree. You shouldn't boo, cheer, celebrate injuries, however you want to. You shouldn't. You should not do that, whether it's here, whether it's in Philadelphia with Michael Irvin, or whatever historic example you want to give. You shouldn't do that. And everyone knows that. And you want to stand up for your coworker, the guy that, you know, you work with every day. That's a good thing, to stand up for your friend and your coworker.
What is the rush like of being in the stadium with 70,000 fans cheering, being the radio broadcaster now for the Browns? That just the feeling of being around the crowd and hearing the crowd at kickoff, and how does it compare to doing all the preseason games for 14 years?
It's awesome. It's a rush. It is. You need to remind yourself to not get too into it. Because if I'm watching on my couch, like if the Browns had a rare Monday or they had a Monday or Thursday or primetime game, or I was in the stands, you have all that energy that comes out. So I got to remind myself sometimes, don't go too over the top. You know, touchdown in week 8 is still a touchdown in week 8. We're not in January, so you got to measure that. However, this year there haven't been many great moments, so the excitement over those great moments maybe is elevated a little bit more for me. So still kind of feeling that out, but it is an amazing rush. The preseason's different, and I had a blast with the Rams. Truly, I consider the Rams, so many people in that organization, family, truly, and we'll always consider them family. I'm a Rams season ticket holder as well, living back in LA. Certainly haven't gone to many games recently, or even when I was working, I was always working on Sundays. But the preseason's different. Everyone knows that. It's you're talking about the football, but you're talking about the guys on the back end of the roster. You're trying to tell human interest stories. Here's an undrafted kid from wherever. His dad used to play. His brother used to play. He had a great story. He was a walk-on. Can he make the team? You're having roster construction conversations. It's a much different feel. You're selling tickets. You're selling local community initiatives. It's fun, and we had a great crew. Andrew Whitworth and Mina Kimes and Marshall Falk and Torrey Holt and Orlando Pace and Nate Burleson and Peter Schrager. I give Kevin Demoff and Jory Hirsch and Marissa Daly and everyone back there with the Rams. They were open to experimenting with any and everything and bringing as many people into the building and into the booth as we can to have a really, really, really good time. And those were fun days. NFL Sundays, when it's actually a meaningful game, that's a different level.
Yeah. Did it seem, I mean, you mentioned that the Browns job was your dream job this whole time, but did you kind of push that goal aside when your TV career was taking off? Like, did it still seem that this was an attainable position after all these years away from radio and away from not doing full-time play-by-play?
Yeah. I had never really thought I would be doing a team radio job like this. No. I've been, fortunate enough to do some NBC games, some Big Ten games the last couple of years for Peacock. That's fun. I always enjoyed doing the Senior Bowl, the East-West Shrine Game, the NFLPA Bowl, all the college all-star games for all those years I did on NFL Network. But that was just, 4 or 5 opportunities a year, maybe with the preseason when we had 4. The most I would get would be 7 opportunities a year. And those opportunities would be over by the time we kick in September for the real games. So it was fun. I wanted to do more, but my job on Sunday at DirecTV for 18 years obviously prevented me from doing that. There had been some, other maybe national radio opportunities over the years that were there, but we could never really sync them up. So no, I didn't really think I was going to be doing this.
When did you do Fox Sports Radio? Were you there for when it launched?
I was there. So that's when I moved to LA. So I got there in 2000. I was working in Chicago. And when Tom Lee, who was the program director at the time, and Craig Kitchen with him, the president of Premier Radio Networks, were putting together the original Fox Sports Radio team, I was one of the people that they hired to do updates and host shows on weekends and do a whole bunch of stuff. So I moved there in August of 2000 for their launch.
How long did you work with Tony Bruno?
I worked with Tony for 4 years.
4 years. How was that?
It was awesome. It was great. Had a great time. It's funny. I had maybe worked there like 2-3 months, and I wasn't on that morning show necessarily. I was, like I said, hosting weekends and doing a bunch of other stuff. And I remember telling a friend at the time, because I had listened to Tony when I was in college, him and Chuck Wilson and Peter Brown and ESPN Radio. I went to Syracuse, and I would listen to them on FAN on weekends, writing papers and whatever. And I said, man, I like it here, but I'm going to be disappointed if in the next year I don't somehow get on that show because that show is so much fun. And then honestly, Brandon, 2 weeks later, Tom Lee called me into his office and said, hey, what do you think of maybe getting up at 3:30 every morning? I'm like, I'll do it. Let's do it. And then we did 4 years, and we had a blast. The show was syndicated. We traveled a lot. We went to every big event. It was a different, day and age in syndicated sports talk radio, but it was a lot of fun.
Were you always passionate about radio? I know radio is
Yeah.
not necessarily, it's not.
No, I
for
was always a
everybody,
radio guy.
Yeah.
I never my TV classes at school. I did them to get my grades. I did broadcast journalism degree at Syracuse, but I was the radio guy, and I tried to just get through my TV classes to get my grade and graduated. I had this much interest in doing it. Zero. Never wanted to be on TV. Never thought of being on TV. Didn't even put together a TV tape coming out of college. I went after radio jobs, and that was it. Somehow I got on TV at Fox in 03. I started doing features on Best Damn Sports Show in 2003, and that was really the first time I had been on television since I left college. And I mean since a class in college.
Yeah. Did you miss radio all these years that you've been on TV now? I find that people watch TV, but the audiences connect more with radio.
Yeah, it's the most intimate of mediums by far. It's just you and the headphones that your listener has on, or the car that they're sitting in traffic listening to you. I've always missed radio. My computer keeps moving. Sorry about that. Yeah, absolutely. But I've stayed in radio. I filled in for Jim Rome for years. I filled in for Rich Eisen for years. I filled in for Dan Patrick a whole bunch back in the day as well. And I used to go into K-Rock and do Kevin and Bean during the football season every Monday in LA, just a segment or two, but stay in radio that way. So I was with Fox Sports Radio until 2009. And I had other radio opportunities to do shows, on the side, like a daily show, and still work at NFL Network. I didn't take them for a number of reasons. It's really hard to do a general interest sports talk radio show when you're so focused on one sport. And so when the NFL became my world, I watch a lot of baseball. I'm a diehard Guardians fan. I watch the Dodgers a lot. I go to baseball games. And so I know my baseball. I don't know my hockey. Not that hockey drives sports talk radio. I could do the NBA. I could certainly do the NBA, but the amount of work, and again, we're not digging ditches, but the amount of work it takes to night in, night out, put aside the rest of your life, your family, your other interests, to stay up on everything, to do an opinion based format every day. It's a lot of work. And not that I don't like that work, I just loved the football more. And between a Monday through Friday at NFL Network and a Sunday at DirecTV, it was good life. And if I wanted to turn on the NBA, I would always watch TNT on Thursday night. Certainly there are those moments. But if I didn't want to watch any of the Sunday games on ABC and I wanted to go hike a mountain, I didn't feel like I was, falling down on the job.
How was doing Red Zone for DirecTV?
Awesome. I loved it. Time of my life. Can't replace that thrill. It's a totally different thrill than calling one game, especially the team you love. But yeah, to call 10 games at once at 1 o'clock Eastern was amazing. I give David Hill and I give Eric Shanks all the credit in the world. They changed sports television. They came up with an idea that has been copied all over the world, not only by the leagues here domestically, but all over the world. Obviously, we've done one now at NBC. I've done 3 Olympics for NBC doing a gold zone. And it's the same format that David Hill and Eric Shanks came up with for the NFL in 2005. And the amount of work for people that work in television, the amount of effort that goes into one of those broadcasts for 7 hours behind the scenes in the control room, juggling grenades, and let's say, I want to go to the game in Miami. And I'm adamant, we got to go to Miami. But, somebody at the control room's listening down the line and the truck's about to break because they missed a break, 4 minutes ago, or somebody off camera is injured. We don't see the injury yet. And the referee and the Red Hat's coming out to say official timeout. And I'm adamant, we got to go to Miami. But no, they're telling me we can't go to Miami because we got to go to Denver. Like, the amount of work that goes into juggling those broadcasts and doing it live seamlessly, they all deserve an Emmy. Every last person in our control room deserved an Emmy every year for 18 years because though that is a thankless, impossible job.
Yeah, I was curious about how much influence you had over the games that were being showed versus was that just a director decision?
It was more. It was a team decision. Let's put it that way. I had a lot, and then our producer Bill Wagner had a lot to say as well. Less director, more producer. Although we loved Eric Manning, he did an amazing job directing all those years as well. And sometimes we would go to his Giants, and the Giants were doing bad things. But it really, I was very fortunate. I only worked with 2 producers in 18 years. That's it. James Crittenden, who was my day one producer, who moved up deservedly so to a senior management position at DirecTV. James did the first, I think 9 or 10 years, and then Bill did the last 8 or 9, whatever that math comes out to. And the rule was generally just only one person could be in my ear. And we had a constant conversation. The show was 7 hours of me talking to him and him talking to me, basically, whether it was James or Bill. And I would say we had all the games numbered, right? So let's say Denver was playing at Miami. To you, it's Denver. To me, in Miami, it's Miami. To somebody else, it's at Hard Rock. It's whatever. That was game 1. That was it. And then the next thing was game 2, game 3. And I would say, we got to go to 3. And Bill would say, no, we got to go to 6. And I said, but 3. And he said, no, but they're going to break. We got to go to 6. So it was yelling out numbers to each other. Like, let's go 3-5. And he said, no, we got to go 6-8. And I go, what do we go 3-5-6? And that was the conversation the entire time for 7 hours.
I think Scott Hanson went to Syracuse Newhouse as well. Was there crossover there? Did you guys were you there at the same? Did you know each other in college?
We did. Scott's we had this conversation this summer. Scott, I want to say he's at least 3 years older than me. He might be 4. So we had like 1 year of overlap, the 92-93 academic year. So I was a freshman. I think he was exiting. He was a senior. I think he might have stayed at 50, whatever it was. But yes, we absolutely knew each other. We weren't close. I mean, I was a kid and he was a senior. But we absolutely knew each other. Years later, I think we're at a Super Bowl like 02, 03, 04, something like that. We ran into each other, reconnected, exchanged numbers. And yes, uh, absolutely. We go way back.
How was working with Scott during the Olympics this past, or did you work with him? Because I know
We
you
did.
guys were kind of splitting the job.
So it was interesting. We did different shifts. I did the afternoon. Then he came in after that. But because, and not to get too boring behind the scenes, we had multiple production crews there because instead of doing 7 hours, we're doing 10. So they had like a first 5 hours were one production crew, the other 5 hours another production crew, and NBC was such a joy to work for. And so long story short, Scott and I did a meeting together in the morning. Not just the two of us, but like the afternoon production crew, we all got together, but because both of us had to work with that crew, we were both in the meeting. So we kind of did the meeting together in the morning and then went our separate ways. And then we would have the handoff on air every day in the afternoon. So yeah, we had plenty of time together, stayed in the same hotel, shared a couple meals. It was good to reconnect. Absolutely. And Jack Collinsworth, Matt Eisman, both also awesome. Did a great job with their shift in the morning. They kind of did it like a fun morning show. They cracked me up, honestly, every day. But the four of us would get together, like I said, same hotel, get meals together. It was a really, really fun experience.
What is the preparation like doing a whip around show for the Olympics? Because like you can know
Terrifying.
most of the know most of the players for the NFL, but
Yeah.
you can't do that for the Olympics.
No. I'm going to sign her again here. I could do an NFL Sunday with my eyes closed. Like, it was my job Monday through Friday at NFL Network. Like, that was my prep. Like, you come in and go, let's go. Now, I had spotters with me. I had Daniel Burris and Bill Kalick, like amazing spotters who, you can't watch 10 games at once and truly get everything in. You're going to miss something when you look at a penalty over here. But for the Olympics, it was a daily cram. It got easier with each passing day of the 17, but I had an amazing researcher named Dan Meyer who was just assigned to our show, and Dan and we would map it out, or Dan would really walk in every day and go, all right, here's tomorrow, right? Here are the medal events in our window. Here is the best American in each event. Here are the American medal favorites in each event. Here are the storylines we need to know. Here, let's cram. And I would take that home every night, and I would do all my own notes on this document that Dan prepared. But it was more than just Dan. The entire NBC has a research staff whose job it is year-round every year to prep for the Olympics. It's not like, oh, the Olympics are in 2 months. Let's pull a couple of people off the NFL and say, go put together a packet for the Olympics. They have a year-round, every year Olympic research staff. So by the time you get to the games, I mean, there's 10,000 athletes, right? They have thousands and thousands and thousands of PDF pages of research. So the challenge is cutting that all down to just what you need for the day.
Yeah. Right. Where do you start?
Right. Where do you start? And then, hey, so this person got through a prelim. I know I'm rambling. Well, they got from a prelim, and then the next day, now it's a medal. So, like, you've learned the stories as you go. By the time you get to the end, you know everybody.
Yeah. Were you bothered or flattered in 2009 when the NFL launched their version of Red Zone with Scott? Like, was that like, oh, well, we must be doing something right? Or was it like, well, why do we need a second one of these?
Can both be true? Like I said before, yeah, I think both can be true. I mean, it was a long, long time ago at this point. Yes, I think I can speak for everybody on the production side at DirecTV. We had and have. I'm no longer there, but an immense amount of pride for the show that we launched and built, and for the trend that we started. And really, as David Hill will tell you, and Shanks will as well, it was taken from soccer in Italy, Serie A soccer. I believe the show is called Forza Goal or Gola, something like that. It was a soccer show that they kind of said, let's turn it into a football show. So as David says, it wasn't his idea. It's just his idea to take it to the NFL. So yeah, we had a lot of pride in that, and would have loved, I think, collectively. I mean, bygones are bygones, to be the only one. But I think there was also an understanding that, hey, we've got a great product. It's a great concept. If everybody can see it, if everybody can enjoy the NFL this way, then it's a win, right? And it's now the way that people generally consume their football.
Could the NFL have used your show? Like, do you know if the NFL approached DirecTV and said, like, are you interested in letting us put this on cable and make it?
Back then?
Yeah.
Oh, I have no idea. I remember
So
is
it was never like brought to you like, oh, the NFL is interested in making this part of their product as well. And instead it was
I was just the 32-year-old host at that point, or whatever, 30-year-old host, whatever it was. So I was not sitting at the table negotiating, a multi-gazillion dollar DirecTV exclusivity deal. I was just the guy that punched the clock and, put the suit on and screamed at a bunch of televisions on Sunday. That was my role in the whole thing. I know I had brought up the idea, the one thing I think that stands out is that they use the same name. I say they. I went to work for NFL Network like a year later, so everyone knows everybody. They
right, that there were two shows called Red Zone.
Right, and that led to a lot of confusion. Like if you called it a different thing, then there would be some kind of separation. But like Scott and I have joked about this 1,000 times. And he has told the story. I've told the story. It's not a story. It happened every week. Like he would say something and then I would get the tweets. Like either, I can't believe you said that, or why'd you switch to that game? And vice versa. I would say something and he would get the tweets. And it took years for people to figure out that there were two. And sometimes, I mean, to this day, I think people are still confused. And like people would, let's say you have DirecTV, you go to your buddy's house to watch a game on Sunday and they turn it on and you go, what is this? You didn't even know it existed, and vice versa. And if you heard from your neighbor, hey, I've got this thing called Red Zone, it's amazing. And you say, well, I want that. So you call whomever provides your home TV and they say, okay, sure, we'll give it to you. And if it's cable, you got Scott. And if you already had DirecTV, you got me. And so we kind of promoted each other in a weird way. And each side got subs from the other, right? And yeah.
So yeah, it wasn't necessarily the rivalry that the internet sometimes wanted it to be.
Look, I had DirecTV. Obviously, I worked at DirecTV. I couldn't even watch Scott's version, right? So it really was a home television entertainment choice that you were making. Like if anyone actually decided that we are dropping this provider for that provider or that provider for this provider because of something that Scott or I did, then, I mean, thank you, I guess. I mean, I don't know. I think he and I would both agree that's pretty remarkable.
Yeah. Now that you are no longer a Red Zone host, are you the type of fan who likes the whip around coverage? I mean, obviously you're busy on Sunday with the Browns, but would you be the type of fan that would watch Red Zone, or would you be the type of fan that watches one game at a time?
I am a short attention span person, first and foremost. That's why I had so much fun doing the show, honestly. And that's why I had so much fun doing Gold Zone on the Olympics. I drive, and since I was a little kid, I have driven the people next to me on the couch nuts by constantly, I'm holding a remote, the TV's over there, by constantly changing the channel. So I do watch the format, and I like the format. As for watching on Sundays, I really don't have much of a chance. Like, I'll give you an example. This Sunday, my folks were here in Cleveland, and after the game, by the time we get out of the stadium, it's probably 4:45. Take my parents, drive out to my aunt's house, big Sunday dinner. My uncle, we have one game on. I put another game on my iPad. There are only two games close at that point. So we watched those two games. It was the Commanders game and the Chiefs Raiders game. So we set up two TVs and we watched them both. I love the format though, and I have no attention span. Like I told people for years, like when we came around in 2005, we didn't invent America's short attention span, but we came around at the time where everybody was starting to get multiple devices, where TVs got cheaper, where people, could find more options or wanted more options, and we just, slid into that niche.
Yeah, no, it definitely it wasn't just fitting into people's sports viewing habits. It fit into the way people just kind of consume entertainment in general now. The way it bounced around so quickly. Did it? I mean, obviously, it requires a lot of energy every Sunday to be hosting that show. Like you have to be on, and you have to be focused, and you don't get breaks. Were there days that you just kind of like dreaded going to work and doing that?
Oh God, no. God's honest truth. I woke up every Sunday morning for 18 years excited to go to work. God's honest truth. There were some days where maybe for whatever reason I didn't sleep well, right? Or tossed and turned, or, landed late from God knows where, and you're exhausted. But there wasn't a single Sunday morning where I had my routine, the same routine, I'm learning, I'm getting a routine now for this as well. I'm kind of a creature of habit that way. And no, I was legitimately excited to walk to work or to get to walk in to work. Before we'd go in there at like 9:58 for a pregame. We did like a 6-minute pregame. My heart raced in a good way, not like, oh my God, I can't talk, but in a good way. Every single time that open played, like luckiest guy on earth. I would have been on my couch anyway. I was, before DirecTV ever called. I had my group of friends. We sat there at one of our friends' father's house, who had the big setup. And we sat there, got the Sunday paper, got bagels, got coffee, and we screamed at TVs for 7 hours. The fact that someone actually told me to put a suit on and do that for a job, are you kidding me? Like, amazing.
Was your caffeine intake different on Sundays than the rest of the week?
I drink a lot of coffee, dude. I like, this is my third cup here today. I generally drink like 3 cups a day during Monday through Saturday, maybe a little less on Saturday. And on Sunday, I drove to work every morning drinking a 5-shot venti iced Americano. And at 10 a.m., it was someone's job. It was not their only job, but someone at 10 a.m. every time we kicked would hand me a regular cup of coffee from the Keurig on set. And I would probably power through 3 of those between 10 a.m. and 1 o'clock. And sometimes I'd have a cup in the late games, but I would probably have, if you include 5 shots, if you consider 5 shots in an Americano to be 5 cups, There's different science on that. But if you consider that 5 cups, then I'd have like 8 cups a day on Sunday.
Yeah,
It's
no,
not
that's
it's not healthy.
good amount of caffeine for sure.
Yeah, it's not healthy.
Earlier this year, Scott had mentioned that the NFL factored red zone in when when making the schedule in terms of the early and late windows, like how many games they were gonna put in each for every week. What was your ideal split for the early and late game windows? Did you have one?
I didn't know if I had an ideal. I just know when you got too many and too few. Like 3 is too few at 4 o'clock. There were some crazy weekends. It only happened once or twice a year where you would get 10 or 11 in the early window. That's too many. But there are also other factors at play here. You know, there teams on the East Coast, once we change the clocks, will tell you that they don't want a 4:25 Eastern time kick where it's dark at the end of the first quarter. They don't want that. It's a strain on public resources as well. I mean, you have fans tailgating at 8 a.m., whether it's fire or emergency. I'm not trying to be dramatic here. Like, it is a strain on the infrastructure to have people tailgating at 8 a.m. and having that game kick at 4, and you're not sending people home by the time you clear the lots and get people out of the building until 10 p.m. It's not ideal. So owners will tell you that, hey, if we're going to be in that 4 o'clock Eastern time window and we're an East Coast team, then we want a big audience, right? Don't put us to 10% of America. Make us a big double header broadcast there. So there are those considerations as well. When you have opened up the international market and you put the 9:30 Eastern time games in London and in Munich and eventually in Madrid or wherever you want to put them, it takes more games away from the meat of that afternoon schedule. It takes more games away from whoever is doing Sunday Ticket, now YouTube, then DirecTV. So you're keeping a lot of people happy. And I understand when fans say, hey, 3 games isn't enough at 4 o'clock, or 4 games isn't enough. Now, the old man in me also wants to say, are you kidding me? This is now what we've become. Watching 4 football games simultaneously isn't enough stimulus. Think about that. Like, 4 games isn't enough to entertain me. I get it. Like, we created a monster. But, and again, I'm going to be old man on my lawn. When Scott and I were kids, right, you would get that one game at 4 o'clock and you would like it. And if there were other games, you only found out what was happening when you went to halftime and Brent Musburger might have shown you a one-play highlight, right? And we have now evolved to the point where, okay, well, this game sucks. Give me another one. What do you mean? There's only 3 other choices? What do you mean 3 of them are at halftime? It's a good problem to have, right? That's how much we love the game and we want to be entertained.
It's still your pinned tweet on your Twitter account that you got a call in 2011 because you host for 2 hours. It turned into 13 years. Yeah. Were you expecting that call 13 years ago? Were you hoping for that call? Were you surprised by it? And what was that call to host those 2 hours for?
Yeah, so it's actually a cool story. I wasn't necessarily expecting the call. I knew a lot of people at NFL Network because we had all worked together at Fox, right? So when Eric Weinberger went from Fox over to NFL Network to help launch and build the network, he brought all the Fox people with him. So like I had a lot of good relationships there, and everyone on the west side of LA, DirecTV, Fox, and NFL Network, everyone knows everybody. And it's a lot of people work at least at 2 out of the 3 at any given time. So like when the phone rang, I'm like, oh yeah, okay, cool. But the phone rang because they needed bodies. It was the end of the lockout in 2011, right? Had that long lockout. They finally get to a deal. And Eric and NFL Network decided that they wanted, when training camp opened, it kind of became what we now know as Back Together Saturday. But that Saturday in 2011, they wanted a talent at all 32 teams. So they kind of emptied their building and they sent everyone out to all 32, and they needed a host. And they literally didn't have a body. And so they called me up and said, hey, could you come in and host for a couple of hours? We're going to do 2 hours, and then probably just wheel it all day. And I said, sure, absolutely. And I was thrilled for the opportunity. Certainly. I called up DirecTV. They said, go for it, have fun. And I went in there. And then that was the day that kind of all heck broke loose. Vince Young, I'm sorry, said, we're building a dream team in Philadelphia. Peyton Manning walked into Anderson, Indiana at training camp with the neck brace, right? And I mean, you have all 32 teams getting back to work. There's so many storylines and things we didn't necessarily know because no one had talked to these coaches or players. And instead of doing 2 hours, we ended up doing 8 or 9 or whatever. We stayed on all day. And they said, hey, can you come back and do it again tomorrow? And I said, yes. And we did 8 or 9. And then they said, all right, well, maybe we'll hire you to do a fantasy show. And I said, okay, cool. DirecTV said, go for it. We taped like one mid-August or early August, like fantasy preview show. And then after we did that, they came to me and said, all right, forget about the fantasy show. You're going to host Total Access. This is before the Rams' first preseason game, I think. I was about to fly to St. Louis. And I went, excuse me? Like, yep, you and Kara Henderson. You guys are, because Rich, it had been announced Rich is leaving, is transitioning off. TA, he's going to do, all the other projects in the building. And I was like, oh, okay, sure. And that was, there are only 2 shows in my DVR back then that were on auto record every single day. They were Jeopardy and Total Access. That was it. And I was like, oh, wow. Okay. And then they hired me full time before the season began. And that was it. It was cool. It was never could have imagined it would have played out that way.
Yeah. And then how was that last 13 years or so?
Amazing. Yeah. I mean, I probably use the same adjectives over and over again, Brandon, but I got paid to talk about football. I'm a lucky guy. Truly. I know that luck comes from hard work and preparation, and I'm, passionate about both of those 2 things as well. Certainly. I'm not naive, but I'm a lucky guy. I got to, host NFL Network shows every day, travel around the country, go to big games, be at big events, go to training camp, go to practice. Do all the little things that any little kid football fan wants to do. Got to do those things. Got to call great events and be at great events and be part of an amazing family, and get to continue that journey here in Cleveland as well. And, do other things. They were 13 great years.
Last thing, I know you mentioned being around the Rams doing their preseason games for so many years. I'm curious. I know just because Matthew Stafford just did the Fox pregame show during their bye week earlier this month. There's always talk about Sean McVay leaving coaching to become part of the media. Who do you think of those 2, Stafford and McVay, just kind of being around them a bit? Which one has a personality that would be better fit for a media career?
That's a good question. I think they both can do it. Sean has Sean's built for TV. That's not saying anything no one hasn't figured out already. I think they'd both be very good. I only saw a snippet of what Matthew did, but I know it was good. I think if you really want to see Matthew Stafford relaxed and comfortable and in front of the camera, the Rams did a great series with him and Cooper Kupp on their team site. A lot of it was shot preseason last year when we were there for a couple of days of practice with the Broncos before a preseason game in Denver. And that's great material. I think Matthew in that setting is awesome, and I think he'd be really good in the studio as well.
And are you interested in doing TV play-by-play for the NFL? I know obviously you keep saying that the Browns radio gig was your dream job, but television that's where the money is. So are you looking at radio as a potential path to TV play-by-play for a network, or is this is where you
listen, I like to stay busy, and I love to be at the stadium. I think this is like what we've done this year has been a lot of fun as well. I got to call Big Ten games, a couple of Big Ten games for NBC and Peacock, and still do NFL games. There are a lot of guys that operate like that. I mean, it's a lot of travel and a lot of close calls, and fingers crossed that hopefully this plane's going to take off. That would be fun. And if you could work in some NFL games, that would be fun as well. Like I said, I am a guy who is grateful every day that he gets up to do this, and always phone rings. I love a challenge,
Andrew, you were great. Thanks so much for coming on the podcast today. Really appreciate it.
Brandon, I ramble a lot and give long, winding answers. So thank you for rolling with me and dealing with my my suspect Wi-Fi.
All good. It was great. That is Andrew Siciliano. I'm Brandon Contes. This is the Awful Announcing Podcast. Please rate and subscribe to this podcast. Please also subscribe to Awful Announcing's YouTube page. But regardless of how you consume Awful Announcing and the Awful Announcing Podcast, thanks for listening and be good.
Thanks for listening to the Awful Announcing Podcast. For the latest news spanning the sports media landscape and more, check out awfulannouncing.com and follow us at Awful Announcing.